So I've been meaning to make this video, and I just saw a clip from Democracy Now! That reignited my interest in this topic. So the question here is Silicon Valley worse than apartheid South Africa? Okay, that sounds maybe like a far out question, but this is a question, or rather, this is a concept that Steve Bannon actually introduced in maybe November of last year when the whole quote unquote MAGA civil war was happening. And he was fighting with Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy about the use of H-1B visas. So what is the connection of Silicon Valley and apartheid South Africa? Well, there are three men that are playing a very heavy role in the current administration who have overlaps with Silicon Valley. These three guys are Elon Musk, which we all know, Peter Thiel, who was a founder of PayPal and also the mentor of the vice president, and David Sachs, who will be the AI czar for the Trump administration. So in addition to being within the realm of tech, these three men all either lived in or were born in apartheid South Africa or some concept of a similar vein. So what does this have to do with Silicon Valley and it being a reincarnation of apartheid South Africa? Well, I currently live in San Francisco, California. Silicon Valley is not too far from me, and I'm quite familiar with it. The problem with Silicon Valley, the problem with San Francisco is manifold, and I will say deeper than the things that you tend to see on Fox News. The problem with San Francisco and Silicon Valley by extension is there is a very technocratic, almost feudal-esque quality to the social structures here. When I say that, I mean that there is very much a divide, it seems, in my opinion, between those that work in tech and those that don't. The people that work in tech, that especially work in higher management or make a lot of money, they are basically the top of this society, and it almost works like an apartheid state insofar as social interactions are concerned. There is very much a feeling here that if you do not work in tech, your value and definitely your quality of life is going to be impacted. There is great, strain in terms of access to resources, particularly housing. And it is really people that make these higher tech salaries that have more reach in that regard. Is that to say that that is their fault or that they are bad in order to, use their money to gain things? No, this is why we all work. However, there is something deeper in terms of having this type of mindset reach the rest of America and specifically reach our democratic government. The problem with this is that in a democracy, one person has one vote, and it's really up to, or we live in a republic, but a democratic republic, one person, one vote, and your value as a citizen is not necessarily tied to your output in terms of the type of money you make, but rather your impact on society, ideally, right? So this is why in the 80s and the 90s, 70s, you had civics courses and things that taught you that not necessarily being rich is the way to be a good person or self-actualize, but rather what you can do for others. But what you'll find when you dig into a lot of these technocrats, a lot of these people that are founders and CEOs of tech companies, is they have a very static view of human beings. Your worth and your value is only associated with how much you can produce. And this trickles down to the people that work in tech. This is why when you go out, you kind of have this feeling that if you don't work in tech, you don't have a big title, you don't have all of these credentialist, meritocratic, quote unquote, we'll get into meritocracy later, kind of accolades that you are essentially living and treated as if you're somewhat a second class citizen. As such, the marrying of how a lot of tech industry kind of trickles down this idea that your value is directly linked to your output, how much you make. It leads to a sort of stratification in status here that is reminiscent of an apartheid state. So what does that have to do with Sachs, Thiel, and Musk? Well, they all have a heavy hand in the current administration. Elon Musk, it goes without saying, he's the head of Doge. Thiel, he is the, mentor of JD Vance, and Sachs as the AI czar. The problem is these people that have these very static, technocratic ways of doing things are going to impart that in the US government and in society. However, a country cannot be run like a company, far less a tech company, in which people are expendable. You see, just today, a bunch of Meta employees were fired. Even those that were not poor performers were fired today. This is the type of ideal that they're going to take into the American social system, and it's not good. So when you marry the technocratic mindset of these tech founders and these billionaires with the fact that they grew up in societies that did not see anything wrong with placing people in specific strata based on what they perceived to be their human output, you can see how that could present a problem for a society whose ideals are equality and access for all, which I know a lot of people hate DEI, but yes, America is founded on the concept, at least, even if it hasn't reached that mission yet, of equality and access for all of its citizens. I would actually go as far as saying that Silicon Valley and the ideals that come out of it, especially as it's embodied by these three men, is actually worse than apartheid South Africa, because at least in apartheid South Africa, the basis of the caste system was racial, and at least you could at least conceptualize that, yes, there were people within each caste that have aspirations and capabilities that are beyond what their forced station is. However, when you come to this technocratic state, what you find is that a lot of people have the veneer of meritocracy to kind of back their claims of why they should be superior over other people. So the reasons why I think it actually is worse than apartheid South Africa is because of this veneer of merit. So I would encourage everyone watching this to go and read or listen to the audiobook called The Tyranny of Merit by Michael Sandel. In it, he posits that a meritocracy is actually worse than a strict stratified caste system like you see, or social system like you see in maybe apartheid South Africa or even Regency Europe, because merit gives the person who has it the false sense that they are actually superior to others and leads them to abdicate their responsibility to the greater good. So because a person does have a high-paying job or a high position or a high credential such as a PhD, it can lead them to falsely assume that not only are they in a position to tell people what they can do with their lives, but it abdicates their responsibility to act in ways that are for the greater good. And you're already seeing this with Elon Musk and Doge. There's a lack of transparency, and frankly, the people that are working there don't feel they have to answer to anyone, because as far as they're concerned, because they were the top of their class somewhere or because they founded this company, they are automatically in a position to tell the rest of us what to do. The dangers of marrying this technocratic way of doing things, quote unquote, false meritocracy, and the governance of the American people is that it has the potential to actually exacerbate inequity and differences between groups, because you reduce, being a citizen into a zero-sum game of the haves and the have-nots, the productive and the unproductive, and that leaves a big chasm in which to fall people who, are maybe disabled, people that have intellectual disabilities, people that are older, and they don't have a lot of quote unquote productive value, but they're still citizens and need to be cared for all the same. So we have to be careful about going under this rabbit hole and what this could mean for our society moving forward.